I can hear you. Yep, there we go. There was
Finally.
yeah, there was something was blocking everything there, and I couldn't work out what it was.
I'm glad it's working at the right time.
So was I beginning to think, oh, how are we going to do this? And we
Yeah,
kept,
yeah. I mean, like it's going to be crazy because I have to type everything I'm saying.
yeah, I know. There you go. Anyway, you all right?
Yeah, I'm good. How you doing?
Yeah, I'm fine. I'm fine. Yeah,
Nice.
still busy. I'm off to Bristol tomorrow for a few days.
Oh,
Because I'm going to deliver some training on Wednesday, and yeah, so yeah, there's a lot going on at the moment, and I just seem to be involved in more and more things, and it's
yeah.
you
Hmm.
know, it's like everything is starting from scratch, and they're trying to build up this huge documentation library of templates and strategies and make sure that it's all going to be managed correctly. It's you don't write a document and just leave it. It has to go somewhere, right? SharePoint, or in our case, a site, and hope should make sure everybody can find everything.
Nice. Well, my
Yeah,
days, my day isn't as eventful as yours.
yeah.
Just work and the start
Mm.
of usual Monday, start of the week and trying to get on things and yeah. So it's pretty nice and awesome to have you here again with me doing this coffee chat. I'm really glad that you agreed to do this with me again, and I'm really looking forward to our conversation today. It seems like a lot of people were very interested in this conversation, and I know a lot of people would still be interested in it. When they finally come across it on social media months from now, I'm pretty sure this conversation would help a lot of people land their next role. Yeah.
Yeah,
So yeah. So
I was,
you
I was going
something.
to say you had actually quite a big response to it. I noticed.
Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
even after the last one, there was still a lot of people were coming in much later, and they obviously watched it. So
Oh, nice,
yeah,
nice,
it's does your profile the world of good.
nice. I'm glad to hear that. That's the whole point of doing this coffee chat, helping a lot of people as much as possible.
Mm.
Right. Okay. So, hi everyone. Welcome to another coffee chat with Michael Clark. The last one we had was like a panel of discussion, and Michael Clark, and we had other technical writers as well, and we had a very impactful conversation. So we're here again for another impactful conversation. This time around, regarding scaling documentation interviews and landing your next role or landing the job. Yeah. So Michael Clark has over 25 years of experience, the senior technical author, and he has helped a lot of technical writers navigate interviews and land roles across industries. And that's why we're having this conversation today. So he's very well equipped to have this conversation. Michael, I know I just did like a brief intro, but would you like to, tell us a little about your background and the kind of work that you do?
No, well, as you know, I'm a technical author. I have 25 years experience. I started off in the software industry, but my job has sort of changed a lot over the years because I moved into a lot of policy and process work, um, you know, working on ITIL flows, instant change, problem management, things like that,
Mm.
IT service management, and also got involved in one or two big audits for companies um, because they want to migrate to a new data center. And it probably comes as no surprise to you, but when companies decide to migrate to a new data center, they have got no idea about what they have in their networks, in their IT fields. They have no idea, and those can be quite big jobs.
Hmm.
Very interesting if you want to get involved in them. Very
Yeah,
much so.
sounds interesting. Hmm.
Mhm.
Okay, so like, what drew you into helping technical writers with interviews?
Say it again.
Yeah, what drew you into helping technical writers with interviews? Because in our last coffee chat, you mentioned that you helped a
Mm.
lot of technical writing, a couple of technical writers, skill interviews, prepare for documentation interviews. So I'm asking, like, what drew you into doing that?
Well, like this job, I wasn't drawn into it. I got phone calls off the cuff. Somebody phoned me up one day, and as it happened, he was put forward for the same job as I had been put forward. However, I wasn't that keen on the job. But an interview's an interview. You never turn them down. Anyway, he asked me a load of questions about what to expect and what to say, and give him some idea of the sort of questions he could be asked, based on the proviso that not everybody who interviews you for a technical authoring job knows an awful lot about our job. It's we see this on LinkedIn. It's we always have this. There's some discussion somewhere. Who understands our job? But nevertheless,
yeah,
he got the job. He got the job, and let's just say the agency was quite pleased with my efforts. And then a few weeks later, it turned out I think this woman was a friend of his, and she was going into technical authoring for the first time in a software company. And I just gave her the advice of what to expect and what they will say. And I says, always be clear. And if you have any samples you need to show, always be able to explain what you have in context.
Yeah.
You just don't write the document for the sake of document's sake. You write the document for a purpose. You know what the purpose is. And sure enough, she got the job as well. And yes, it's these questions I've just been asked quite a few times over the years. It's what can I expect at an interview? And I have to say, I've interviewed a few technical authors as well. And I can tell you what, within the first 2-3 minutes of interviewing a technical author, you can generally tell whether they're going to be suitable for the job. And we're communicators. So if you're going to go for a job, communicate, speak clearly, be truthful. Don't blow up your CV or make massive references to something you may have touched upon and say, "Oh, I did this." Because I tell you, you've got to be careful because it might just come back around and bite you.
Exactly.
Right. Yeah. And some people, technical authors, just don't interview very well. And it does make me wonder why they're in the role in the first place. If you can't talk to somebody who's interviewing you, how are you going to talk to an SME, a subject matter expert?
Exactly.
We need to speak to these people in the right way to get the information that we need. So, just expect questions in that vein. Yeah, go on.
That makes a lot of sense, actually. I mean, like, so like from your experience, what makes documentation interviews different from other roles in tech?
Well, that one might be a little difficult to sort of answer, but in a lot of cases, let's just put this out there. I was a contractor for 18 years.
Wow.
I worked on more than 45 roles, 45 contracts. That doesn't include those where you go for an interview and it doesn't sound right, but you get offered it and you go in, you think after a week or so, this ain't working, I'm out of here.
Yeah.
It's yeah. Just repeat the question again.
Yeah. So from your experience, what makes documentation interviews different from other roles in tech? So yeah.
Yeah, I think I've already mentioned it. I think you've got to see how well does the person interviewing you, how well do they understand your role, what your job is? Because I have been on quite a number of interviews and I can tell the person is struggling to ask questions. And it's what I say, it becomes a turnaround. I start interviewing them and asking, what have you got? What do you expect? in terms of documentation. What do you want at the end of the day?
Yeah.
You start asking them because they simply just don't know what to ask you. They know what they want, but, in
Yeah,
technical
exactly.
industry, they don't understand what what it is. So
Yeah,
you could find yourself. So I would say if you're going in for an interview, just prepared. If the other person doesn't understand it, just start interviewing them yourself.
exactly.
And it
I,
it works out. It's worked for me. If it worked for me, I'm sure you can make it work for yourself.
exactly.
Hmm.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense actually. I mean, if someone doesn't understand your role, you educate them,
Hmm.
be the mentor on the call, tell them
Yeah.
about your role, teach them about your role, communicate. But firstly, find out the results, or rather the what they are looking forward as the outcome. What do they want at the end of the day? What are they
Yes.
looking for? And from that, you can now because at the end of the day, you don't want to teach your interviewer, you don't want to like derail the conversation to something else. So it has to still, I don't know, correct me if I'm wrong, it has to remain in the context of what you're looking for. Yeah,
Now
right.
I can give you an example. Um, this was much further down the line into this career.
Hmm.
And I had an interview for a company which based not far from where I live, a place called Great Missenden. And I went for the interview, and the interview was going quite well. And I just said to the fellow interviewing me, I says, "Do you have any examples of the documentation you have written here?" Oh, he says, "Yes, yes." And off he went and came back a few minutes later with this documentation. And I started looking through it, and I said, "This is not very well written. It's not very well formatted. Little bit difficult to understand." I says, "Who wrote it?" He said, "Me." Yeah,
Yeah,
that that didn't go down too well. Let me just say, I didn't get that job.
you didn't
So
get it right. Because it's going to look like you're bashing the interviewer at the end of the day.
yeah, it's so.
Yeah.
There's the one tip for you: if you do get an interview and they've got samples of their documentation they want to show you,
Mhm.
just be careful what you say. Don't,
Exactly.
don't come out and say, "Oh, well, this is rubbish. We can do far better than this." Who wrote it? Me. Yeah.
Oops. Well, I think my usual approach in such scenario would be, oh, I think this works, but if I was to work on this, this is what I would do differently. So you
Mm.
have to like give them this I would say praise them a little bit first and be like, because you don't want to come off as it's just like saying you're looking at a company's UI and you're saying, oh, the UI is great in this and this and this aspect, but I think this can be better. From my experience, I think this can be done better. So I think that would come off as less negative or less, you know,
Yeah,
them.
yeah. Always be positive when you know it's negative. Don't throw both your feet in because it probably won't work. But
Yeah,
yeah,
that's
it's
mm,
kind of
like
example where I've been
yeah.
in for interviews, and I've been for interviews and started a role, and after a couple of days, you begin to think, "What on earth have I got myself into here?" Because
Mhm.
it's not what you expect. It seems that the hiring manager knew what to say to you, but
Yeah,
what they were saying to you is not really the problem. The problem is somewhere else.
yeah,
It's, yeah, you've always, if you've been if you ever are a technical author, as long as I have, or if you have a contract, you will come across many a situation, and you've got to learn how to read the person. We deal with people all the time.
true.
Read, what are they saying and what are they not saying here. you
Mhm.
know because you've got to be careful. You don't get yourselves into a job which is not going to work for you, because there's
Exactly.
nothing worse than being in a job when you're you're finding the people around you are just not working with you, or the hiring manager is, well, you're here now, make the best of it.
Mm-hmm.
No, as a contractor, you can do that. You can sort of jump out after a week, but as a permanent, if you're permanent, it's not that easy because you've got to find yourself got to go through the whole routine of finding yourself a new job.
Oh yeah. Makes sense. So like what are the most common things hiring managers are looking for in a tech writing interview? I know we've said a couple of things, but like what are like the most common things that they look for in a technical writing interview?
Well, one of the things they're quite interested in is how long will it take?
Mm-hmm.
How long is a piece of string? How long will it take? You know, um, and then you say, well, how many documents do you have? They turn around and say, oh, 65. We've identified 65 documents. How
Yeah.
long is it going to take?
Mm-hmm.
Look, if you want 65 documents done to a good, a level where they will pass muster and people are able to use them, you'll probably talk a couple of years worth of work. That's one of the things. How long does it take? How do you do your job? We have, say, let's say for the sake of it, 10 documents. How do you work on 10 documents at once? Well, you can't work on 10 documents at once, but you're probably working on 2 or 3 because you start one document off, you get it to go out for a peer review, and you start another one, and possibly another one. Because sometimes you can only go so far, is because they say, well, who do you need to speak to? And you say your SMEs, are they available? And they should know the answer to that question. If they don't know who the SMEs are, they're going to have a few problems. So have you got SMEs? And are you capable of using Confluence? Can you, what sort of tools do you use? Can you use Visio? Things like that. They'll always ask about something. And maybe sometimes they might ask if you have any sample of work. I have to say, in the last 15 years, I've never produced any samples of work because one, I was always subject to an what you call NDA, non-disclosure agreement. So therefore, I couldn't discuss what I'd seen anyway or what I'd written. But these are all sorts of questions they'll ask, and sometimes they'll ask questions, and you'll think, what's that got to do with technical writing? I was working on a GDPR project, and it was a business analyst who interviewed me. Well, all these questions were just, what? I don't understand the question.
Mm-hmm.
And strangely, I didn't actually get the job at the first, after that interview. But I was talking to the agent, and I said the bloke who was interviewing me
Mm-hmm.
wasn't aware what a technical author is. So somebody else interviewed me, and I got the job. It's just watch out for questions it's somebody works in a different field. I think it also applies to you when it does not. It's just be prepared for them. You'll have to make something up on the spot quickly. So think of something or just say outright, I'm sorry, but that what you've asked is not really relevant to what I do as the technical author. You can say, if you recognize it, just say that's more relevant to you as a business analyst and not myself. We have a lot of crossover between
Mm-hmm.
BAs and TAs, but just remember, we are two distinct roles.
Yeah, I think, and that's where the educating your interviewer about your role comes in, because you need to, if they don't understand your role, you have to tell them about your role.
Yeah, well, this is it.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're going to get that all the time.
Yeah.
It's just the way people are.
True. So like for instance, if I have to, as a tech writer, if I have to present my, let's say, documentation samples or portfolios at a certain interview, how do I do that?
Have you got a portfolio? Got a
Yeah,
portfolio?
yeah, more like a content portfolio, not the regular developer portfolio website.
Yeah, it's just I once had a I used to have it here, but I think it's gone now because it's never been used. It was just a file with some samples in there, and you can always just say, "Here, I've got some samples for you to actually have a look at." You
Mm-hmm.
know,
Mm-hmm.
just be careful if you've worked on something which is confidential.
Yeah.
Don't show it's confidential. You know, it's I have found a lot. They don't tend to ask anymore. There used to be a lot of agents would say, "Do you have examples?" They asked that quite a lot, and then I would
Yeah.
send some examples off because they wanted to see something before they interviewed you. But I don't see that question being asked much because, as I already said, a lot of us in some of our work sign non-disclosure agreements, which
Mhm.
means we can't actually give anything or give any indication of what we've been working on. You know,
Yeah.
so it's up to they will ask if beforehand if they have asked, make sure you have something. But if they don't ask, you can always take one along and see what they say. You know.
So, like, how do you prove your expertise then if you don't have portfolios, if you don't have samples, and you can't share the samples because of the NDA agreement you signed? So, like, how do you prove your competency during
Mm.
the interview?
Talk. you
That's
you
simple.
ex- you
Simple and
explain things in context. You know about the sort of documents that you've worked on, because sometimes it's they will tell you what they have,
mm,
and then they might expect you to have an explanation as to how you might start. I had one such interview before the pandemic for quite a well-known data center company. I can't remember the name, but I wouldn't mention them anyway. And the fella interviewing me was talking about all this disparate documentation here, there, and everywhere. It
mhm.
was not centrally managed or focused, and he wanted to know how are you going to do it, you know. And it's what you're going to do basically is you've got to start getting people to start looking at their C drives, wherever they store their own documentation, and start putting it into a central place. And
Yeah.
then you've got to sort of decide: is this of any value? Does it have any value? If so, then you can move it through to the next stage.
Mhm.
It's and then you've got a fairly drawn out process which comes along later, which involves a lot of people. You know, just if you know your job, and you will be able to guide them through it just by talking. Just be clear about what you need to do. Ask what DMS SharePoint. Do you SharePoint? Do they
Mhm.
use something else? Um, how do they manage their documentation? It's and the thing is, sometimes you might ask a question
Mhm.
which they might think, "Oh, we never thought about that. We do that, but nobody's asked us about that yet." And that
Yeah.
can well, and this shows that you're just not thinking about the job to start with, but the job going forward. Because as we all know, documentation never ends. It's continual, and
Yeah.
that's the opportunity. And also talk about what's it? Constant improvement. Improving things, improving the processes, improving the documentation.
Mhm.
you know, Make sure they can see you have long-term goals, that you are going to bring some value to the job, you
Yeah.
know,
Right. Mhm.
that you're not going to worry about it. You've got to be you. Make sure,
Yes.
give them the benefit of your experience in an interview.
That hits the nail on the head. Thank you. So, like, how do you recommend preparing for take-home assignments or live writing tests? Because most of these interview processes require that you have like do a take-home test to show that you're competent. that's after you've had the first stage of interview, and then second one, and then they give you this assessment. They go do this, and let's see how good you are. So, how do you recommend a technical writer preparing for such assignments?
Well, I personally have never been asked to do one, but I
Okay.
do know technical authors have been asked to do them.
Yeah, I have been.
And I think in this instance, you should be warned beforehand that is what they're going to do. Is that they're going to give you a test or an assessment or an assignment to
Yeah.
sort of look at. Just be aware of it. But also be careful, because there's been a lot of talk about this on LinkedIn, is where a company approaches you and say, we have some interviews, but before that, we want the candidates to do this, that, and the other. Be careful, because these might not just be an idea to see how well you do your job. You might inadvertently be doing some free work for them.
I knew that's what you were going.
I've been caught out on that. Got called in for an interview and asked to look at something. I must have sat there for 2 hours going through this documentation, and it turned out basically, as the agency later said, they just wanted free work. That's what turned out what it is.
You just end up doing an audit for them, free audit.
Yeah. Like I say, it's I'm sure you've heard of this company called McAfee. You heard of McAfee?
Not sure.
Antivirus company.
Okay, yeah.
They wanted me to do a grammatical test, and I was only told about 10 minutes before I was due to leave to go to the interview. Now, unfortunately, as it stood, they said it would be an hour's written test, grammatical test, then at least an hour's interview. But as it stood, I couldn't actually do it because I had to get back and go as it was a second interview that day. I had 2 interviews that day, and I did prefer the second one over the first one. So make sure you know about it, because
I think usually they let you know that, okay, they usually tell you all the stages of the interview process, that there will be this, then there will be this, then there will be this. So you usually know beforehand. But what you wouldn't know is the kind of assessment you'll be given. But in most cases, and in some cases, I won't say most because I'm not sure. So in some cases, they actually pay for this assessment. So, I mean, if you get paid for the assessment and you think it's worth it, then attempt it. But you have to apply discernment to be sure that you aren't doing free work, so that you don't end up doing free work and then you get ghosted, because it has happened to me in the past. I know how painful it can be. So you just have to be very careful. And makes a lot of sense.
Didn't Wisdom get caught out on something like that? Something. He's referenced it somewhere.
Yeah, he said the last chat we had.
It's just be careful, because also when you're doing this, it's probably taking you good 2 to 3 hours. Sometimes it's really not very fair on you. But just talking about interviews. How many interviews have you had in your career?
I can't say and give an exact number. More than 10.
Right.
So,
how many stages have been involved in your interview? It been a 1 stage, 2 stage, 3 stage?
Yeah, mostly 3 stage. And then sometimes the last stage might be you meeting the CEO or CEO, someone in the company. That's when you know that you've gotten the job.
Yeah. Because the problem is with some of these 2 stage, 3 stage interviews, they're probably all very well. But there was a company not far from here, based about 6 miles away, 10 kilometers away from here. They interviewed me, and says, "Oh, we'll arrange another interview, second interview for whomsoever." But by the time they got round to it, another company had phoned up and offered me the job, offered me another job. You know, I, it's a strange thing, but it's happened quite a few times. I was once interviewed by the City of London Police for a process job, but I had to go through, let's just say, security clearance to work there. And by the time they got the security clearance done and arranged a second interview, another company called Nationwide Builders Society had come along, interviewed me for 15 minutes and offered me the job.
You see. Yeah, I wonder why some interview process takes a long. I've heard people complain that they apply for this job, they get back to them, they have like the first stage of the interview, and then they don't hear from them for a couple of months, and then they get back from them, and it's crazy because I'm like, should I sit still waiting for you to get back to me? I'm like, yeah, so I wonder why
Yeah.
they do that though.
The other thing I find irritating about sort of interviews is when agents call and they say, "We have this job," and they put you forward for it. And then you
Yeah.
never hear anything. Then you phone them up and say, "What about this job?" "Oh, it's on hold." And you're thinking, "Well, why didn't you tell me?"
Right.
You pick your phone up and call me. You know where I am, and you can tell me the job's on hold.
Yeah.
It's that happens quite a lot, and I realise just how frustrating that can be.
Yeah, it can be. Yeah, I mean, the waiting period is crazy.
I know. Well, they always say the hardest thing about the job is getting the job. But once you've got the job, it's probably the easiest thing to keep.
Yeah,
As long as you know what you're doing.
Yeah, I agree. Okay. So I don't know if there's any other question I haven't asked that we haven't covered because I feel like we've had a very informative conversation already. So what are like some of the biggest mistakes you've seen candidates make during interviews? Or maybe you've heard, right? You've heard they make during interviews.
Well, I remember there was a many years ago. I received a phone call from an agency, and he was asking me what my availability was. Well, my availability was nothing at the time because I was involved on a very well-paying contract job, and I wasn't about to walk away from it. And the problem was the company had interviewed several technical authors for the job, not me, I hasten to add, others. And he decided not to go with the technical authors. He then employed somebody from the company itself who expressed an interest in the job. And 2 or 3 months down the line, that person was struggling to do the job. Apparently, they were making stuff up. They weren't talking to the SMEs, and when they started reading the documentation, they thought, "Oh, hang on, I think we need to have a word with somebody about this." And suddenly they realised, "Oh, we better get a proper technical author in to do this job." That's a common mistake made by sometimes the clients is that they decide to keep the costs down. We don't want to pay a technical author because they're expensive. Let's pay one of our own staff to do this job.
Yeah.
And when it doesn't work out, the result is it costs them twice as much because they have the technical author in, and that means they're having to pay the technical author again. So they end up, in some cases, paying for the job twice. So that's not an uncommon one. And if you ever work as a contractor, don't be surprised if you get such a call like that. And help, we need a technical author. How good are you at your job? Help.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Makes sense. There's one question I want to ask you regarding like career stories and case studies. So like during interviews, how should a technical writer structure their career stories and case studies?
How should they structure their case studies?
Yeah, when I say like I mean like I think career stories would be a better word to use. So like how do they structure their career stories? How do they tell their experience to the interviewer in such a way that it sounds compelling? I wouldn't say compelling, but I would say in such a way that it communicates their role in the best way possible and their experience in the best way possible.
Yeah. It's highly unlikely you're going with anything written in that case, but you will probably always remember your most difficult job.
Okay.
And once again, it's about communication, being
Yeah.
able to explain how you did it step by step and
Mm.
how you got to the final, the destination where they wanted the documentation to go. As I said before, this is about communication, explaining things in a simple language. Don't overcomplicate things. Don't
Mhm.
start using jargon or something because seriously, it doesn't go down very well. Just keep things nice and easy and
Yeah.
explain everything in a step by step process. You know,
Mm.
there has been a case where I've actually said, "Do you mind if I use the board?" And I've got up with it and sort of gave the step by process on the board.
Yeah.
It works. I got that job at Vodafone doing that.
Nice.
Yeah.
So like being able to, communicate how you can carry out that job in the simplest way possible and step by step. Yeah.
Yeah. Mm.
So like, what are some examples of the strong ways versus the weak ways you can actually talk about your past work?
Have you ever been asked the question, what's that question? What's your strongest point and what's your weakest point?
I think sometimes I get asked that question. Yeah, I've been asked that question, but like not many times.
How do you answer when you're asked what's your weakest point or what's your, you know, what can distract you? What do you say?
I would say it's miscommunication or um, a break in bridge of communication. Let's say, for
Mm,
instance, I need to get in touch with this SME ASAP,
mm,
and there's a blocker, and I can't get my hands on this SME, and because of that, it
mm.
hampers every other thing I'm working on. So yeah, so at that point, I won't know what to do, and I won't know how to handle the situation. Except someone else comes in. So I would say something like that. But it's a very tricky question because at the same time, you don't want to present yourself as someone who can't do the job in the entire.
Uh, yeah, I've been asked that question quite a few times, and my answer is always this: I say I don't think about it. I,
That's a very brutally honest answer.
I don't think about it
But
because there are things that need to be done.
exactly.
If I sat here thinking about my failings
Yeah,
or what I can't do and could do for the next hour, we get nowhere. I just
exactly.
think
Yeah.
positive steps all the way.
Mhm.
What are your weak points? No,
Yeah. No
I
one,
don't.
no one
I
actually
don't
thinks
have any weak points when it comes to the job. You know,
exactly. Yeah.
25 years certainly not.
Yeah.
Done.
Mhm.
That's what I do. So
Yeah. Mm.
that's what I'm
Brutally.
saying. Don't don't concentrate on negatives. Always be positive.
Positive.
You
Yeah.
make sure that the hiring manager or the person interviewing you knows exactly what you are saying, and start when you start to see the person interviewing starting to go, oh, you're there. You know,
Yeah.
you're getting the questions right, hitting the nail on the head.
Yeah, yeah. Nice. So, like, what advice do you have for people that or people who might not meet every requirement in a job post? Because I've heard some people say, "Oh, if you meet 50%, go for it. If you meet 80%, go for it." So, like, what advice do you have for people like that?
Look, I've been for many a job where let's just say, what was it? Confluence was used. I'd never seen Confluence used, but my usual thing is to say they all work the same way. You know, they do work the same way. And there is a blog. I have a blog out there which does say if you don't know how to use it, don't admit you don't know how to use it, because if you get the job, you can probably learn how to use it in the first morning, and then if your manager doesn't know, you can teach your manager how to use it as well. Look, there's a lot of the things we use, because I'm afraid I've got a very restricted thing of just Word, Visio, PowerPoint, Confluence, and RoboHelp I used at one stage. So I have a very limited set of tools. So there's nothing I don't know about Word and PowerPoint and Visio and Confluence and SharePoint and other document management system. Because you see use one, they're all very much the same.
Yeah, very similar.
You know, so if you don't cover every aspect, don't worry about it. You know, but there is always the possibility of you can go online and have a look at the tool they're talking about, and do give you an opportunity to work on them. You know, do that way. You know, we're not always going to fulfill all the criteria, but such is the shortage of technical authors in the UK. You know, as a lot of companies cannot afford to be, what should we say, choosy. They have to go with the candidate who has given them sort of a best fit, even if it just matches 80% of the job. Unless, of course, they sound really bad.
Okay. Well, I didn't know that, but okay. So, like, how can someone stand out when the competition is high?
You know, competition in the UK, I don't think is that particularly high. One day I applied for a job, and it was about 2 weeks after I applied for it, and the agency phoned me up. He says we had 220 candidates for the job, and I went, "What? 220 candidates? That's not possible." He says it would have been better if I saw your CV first and saved me a lot of time. He says because I can tell you more than 90% of the candidates weren't suitable for the job.
Wow.
You know, in reality, probably in some cases, we've probably only got competition here. There's only another 2 or 3 people who are in for the job, or want the job just like you. You know, there's not that much competition. It's about, it's about you, how you put yourself across, and make it so that they don't forget you. Give them a business card. That works very well. Have a business card, or that's got my private number on, which agencies don't like you to do it, but you do it anyway. It always looks impressive.
Nice.
If you really want the job, you'll get the job.
Yeah, that's true. Nice. Well, I don't know if anyone has any questions. We're already like for 3 minutes into the coffee chat. So if you have any questions, feel free to ask in the comment section. For anyone who'd watch this recording afterward, feel free to reach out to me or Michael, if you don't mind. Michael, do you mind?
No. I've had lots of requests on LinkedIn. All these people want to be my friends now.
I mean, don't go into Michael's DM empty-handed. Come with something nice. Michael, what do you like?
What do I like in what?
Like, if someone was to come into your DM, what would you like them to bring in with them?
Bring some chocolate on it.
Oh wow! So you like chocolate like me?
Or a latte, or a conversation, whichever they want.
Okay, so as many of you follow Michael Clark on LinkedIn, or the Michael Clark's LinkedIn, I think, is linked to the description under this YouTube video, so you can connect to him on LinkedIn. Don't forget to bring chocolate or fresh conversation. So yeah. Thank you very much, Michael, for this very insightful conversation. I'm trying to, as much as possible to keep to time. So we'll be out here for 45 minutes. Yeah, cool. So see ya, everyone. Thank you so much, Michael. Bye.
Yeah. See ya. Bye.
Bye.